And we're live. We are live. Welcome, welcome everybody. It's good to see everybody out on day two, Tuesday, $2 Tuesday, as it used to be with the movies, for the second day of RMUS Tech Week. So if you joined us yesterday, fantastic. If you were not able to join us, we had two great sessions. Fraser and I kicked off the week just to talk a little bit about things that are going on in the industry overall, some of the technology trends, some really cool new technologies, some of the things that we're working on with RMUS. And then in the afternoon, we had a great discussion um, with some of the events and some of the tactics, some of the things that are happening in the Ukraine. So it was ostensibly a discussion about how military technology advances will move their way into the commercial markets. And so there's some really interesting insights that'll have big effects on things like wildfire, uh, BV loss applications, GPS denied, all kinds of good stuff. And so we're pretty happy. So the links will be in the chat room if you want to go ahead and get caught up on yesterday. We have this afternoon. We'll be talking about digitizing the mine, and then we'll go through the rest of the week's events as we finish up this particular session. So what I'd like to do now is introduce our panel for today. This is this is an all-star panel. It's kind of awesome to look at all these gentlemen in the same place at once. So I'll start out by introducing a great guy, a legendary guy in the Canadian space, Michael Cohen from Qii.AI, and also chair of Aerial Evolution Canada. He is everywhere, and he has worked tirelessly to promote the industry. So let me introduce Michael Cohen, and just give us a quick blurb about yourself and Qii.AI, please, Michael.
Thanks, Kevin. I was making fun of you before this. You're the same age as I am, and the $2 Tuesday movie reference confirms it. For sure. Um, Angad and Ted, it's a pleasure to be here with you. I admire what you're doing with your careers very much. Michael Cohen, founder of Qii.AI. There's always sort of a hat trick in success in our industry. There's a hardware side, software side, and some sort of expert who understands how to get to an end. Key AI sits in the software side of that equation. So happy to be here.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And secondly, from, I mean, this gentleman has PR teams, he has marketing teams. Skydio teams are absolutely everywhere. You can't miss them. So we were lucky to get him. So please welcome Angad Singh from Skydio. Please introduce yourself.
Kevin, that was very kind of you. Probably too kind. Hey, my name's Angad Singh. I'm at Skydio. I manage all of our non-federal resellers. So the resellers that are providing this Skydio technology to end users in the enterprise, state, local, and education space. I've been in the drone industry for a couple of years now. Maybe, I don't know, it depends on how old you consider the modern drone industry to be in terms of years, but I've been doing it since, pre-Phantom 1 days. So been here for a while. And I spent the beginning of my career at Pix 4D, so teaching a lot of photogrammetry classes and enabling those technologies in the field. And now I've moved more towards the business side, but very happy to be here to represent Skydio on this panel today.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us. So, two certainly industry legends. Our third panelist is kind of a modern day LinkedIn and I don't know, probably TikTok legend too. I think he probably has more followers than all of us combined. Lots of incredible content that he's made. He has his own company, SkyDeploy. He's a professor. He does it all. So let me introduce Ted Strazimiri from SkyDeploy. Ted, go ahead.
Wow, thank you, Kevin. Every time you introduce me, it gets better and better. I love it. Pleasure to be here, guys. I'm very passionate about digital reconstruction, photogrammetry, and the digital twins we're going to be talking about today. And over the last 7 or so years, I've been working out in the field with end users and really understanding what they actually want and what actually has value. So happy to share my thoughts on what we talk about today.
Fantastic, fantastic. So thank you again all for joining us. So our topic today, as we mentioned, is going to be, digital twins for infrastructure for use in asset management. And so we have an interesting cross section of collection and enabling collection and enabling the data. So we've got, soup to nuts, as it were, for everything. So let's start off with the soup. I guess that makes you the nuts, Michael. That was an accident, actually, but let's start with the soup, Angad. So, talk to us about how Skydio is really enabling data collection in some of these really, really difficult to get at areas like bridges, for example, and even some of the other vertical infrastructure.
Sure, absolutely, Kevin. I think to sum it up, Skydio is a hardware company, right? It's manufacturing drone technology in the United States. It has two current lines of pieces of equipment on the market: the S2, which is a smaller drone, and the X2, which is slightly larger in size. X, you can think of it as expert or enterprise or even expensive because it does cost more than the S2. Part of the reason for that is it's NDA compliant, which means that it fits the standards for federal usage in the United States from both a supply chain and an information security perspective. And quite frankly, they're both amazing pieces of technology which are different from the traditional drones that we're using on the market for one very key technology difference, which is that traditionally our drones that we've been using have a GPS based stability for positioning. So essentially, the drone has a GPS that connects to multiple satellites and that allows it to know where it exists in space. And it's relying on not hitting objects and traveling to the next location and flying based on pilot input or some, in terms of a lot of mapping pieces of equipment on the market that we may be using, putting in GPS waypoints. And where Skydio really differs from a technology perspective is that Skydio is primarily a drone or an airframe that's based off vision navigation. So if you've sat in a Tesla, you've sat in a vehicle that has a bunch of cameras that's seeing the world around it and that's understanding that world around it and making decisions so that it's easier for the driver to travel along their path, right? It sees other vehicles that are around you, it sees a wall in front of you, it recognizes that red light and it helps you stop, right? When you think of Skydio, you can think of a drone that's also operating in a similar technology pathway where there's a sensor suite of 6 cameras on the drones, on 3 on the top, 3 on the bottom, that build a near perfect map of the world around it, a point cloud. What's that doing? It's really innovating on the way that we can think about using drones in the field. Because let's take the example of a complex object like a bridge, which is something that the three of us on this panel tend to know a little bit about, a bridge inspection. If we take a bridge, we want to take photos underneath the bridge, on top of the bridge, of all surface areas of that structure. Now, a lot of times when the drone goes underneath that bridge or gets close to that piece of equipment, a drone that doesn't have cameras on it to see the asset it's looking at may have the potential to crash. Where Skydio is genuinely innovating and pushing the boundaries on how hardware can collect images is because the drone is seeing the asset that it's scanning or taking pictures of, and it's avoiding the asset itself while it's capturing photos of that asset. What does that mean? That means that you take the 3D scan application, which is software that's built onto the drone. You basically tell it the volume or the object that you're capturing, want to capture images of. So the bridge or the utility pole, right? That drone will then just, zoom around the whole thing. And on board, it will understand what you're looking at. And then it will strategically determine the best locations to take photos. So now the traditional mindset is we're doing grid missions, above, or a lawnmower based pattern above the asset. Now we don't have to be above the asset the whole time. We can also be within 3 to 10 feet of that asset at multiple different angles. And so you can think of it like, I mean, quite frankly, you have to see it to believe it. It is really quite amazing the way that Skydio is able to avoid the object that you're looking at while also simultaneously taking the best, most close-up pictures of the asset that you're looking at. And it really is changing the way that we can think about image capture. And obviously, Ted and Michael will have comments on that as well, so I don't want to go on forever. But it's AI and it's autonomy that's making it easier for the end user, and it's really, I would say, democratizing the image collection process because it's taking away, years of experience that would be required to collect pictures of complex objects, and allowing a piece of technology to do it for you.
Fantastic, thank you. And I think it's important we started to talk about yesterday, and we'll talk about it much more for the week. This idea of using AI not just for analysis, which Michael will talk about shortly, but also for that advanced navigation, and that's going to be important for ground robots, eventually for ROVs as well. So pretty exciting. And then one other thing I wanted to highlight too is the NDAA compliance, and it was one of those things. Obviously, it came about for DoD applications. Um, but what we're starting to see, not more so south of the border than north of the border, but we're certainly seeing it here, is there are infrastructure owners that are starting to look very carefully and saying, particularly if they're U.S. owned, that maybe we do want a U.S. platform and not a Chinese one. So the fact that Skydio has both options, and again, you pay for NDAA. It doesn't matter whose NDAA it is. But you have that option, right? And it's very, very intelligent, to have that option. So let's move on to you, Ted. So before we go to Michael to talk about the back end, so Ted, you're the one that's doing this out in the field. You're the user. So you're not promoting any manufacturer agenda. You're not doing anything. Talk about how you would have done a bridge or a complex asset before Skydio, and then talk about how you do it now and what that's meant to you.
Yeah, no, I'm all about using the right tool for the job, right? So if we're doing a mapping mission, then it's probably not going to be a Skydio I reach for first. But if I'm doing a complex infrastructure inspection, there's really nothing else that can get the angles and the safety that a Skydio system provides. So in that context, I think of the system as more than just a tool. It's a partner out in the field because it significantly reduces the workload that you have to deal with and the expertise that's required to handle that workload. So, due to that reduction in workload, you can be much more efficient and you can collect much more data in the same amount of time. And ultimately, there's a lot of data out there to collect. So, we need to get really good at scaling this up. And then once you have it, the other nice thing that I love is that it's completely agnostic to what you use for post processing. So at the end of the day, it's just pictures of areas that you need to see and see clearly and up close, and how you disseminate that data and turn it into a deliverable for the end user, or if you're the end user yourself using the system, it doesn't really matter. So that's my 2 cents on that. But it's always about the right tool for the job. So the navigation and the obstacle avoidance is unmatched, and ultimately, it's also comparatively very affordable to other options that you would have. So from a service provider perspective, I kind of feel like I'm cannibalizing my services when I pitch this, but honestly, I see that as the eventual future. Everyone will have to have something like this in the back of the truck alongside their laptop or iPad. So
Yeah, it's fantastic, and I can remember, for those of you in the Toronto area, testing a an M210 with M210 RTK with the base station underneath the Overlea Bridge, which, for those of you not in Toronto, is a big old concrete structure in a big valley. It's a pain in the butt. It didn't work well. We put a Flyability Elios cage drone in there. That was not efficient at all. Like an 8-minute functional flight time. If there's any wind, if it's a bigger structure, you're done. So I think your point about the actual price point relative to the value is huge. Again, a hover map would be another option that costs 10 times more, right? So, and I know we went head to head with something in Quebec with the Champlain Bridge versus a cage solution, and the Skydio came out well ahead in terms of everything. So for you, I guess, in terms of the actual deployment, when you think back to your first time using it, what was the most amazing thing? Angad talked about how amazing it was for him. For you, what was the most amazing thing as a kind of a grizzled veteran out there?
Honestly, we haven't been doing this for all that long because using drones for bridge inspections is a relatively new paradigm shift, even for our DOT, our MTO, or Ministry of Transportation here in Canada. So we're moving towards it being the norm, but it only really started 2 years ago. And when we started doing them, we were using a standard manual drone. It was an Inspire 2, and we had to keep the distance from the structure quite far, about 5 meters. about 15 feet for Americans watching, and we got some data, but it wasn't fantastic. I had to return to that bridge. I was doing it every 6 months, and the second time I came, I actually purchased a Skydio secondhand off of like Craigslist, basically, and it was a just bone stock, off the shelf Skydio with a few batteries, and we just tried it. We weren't really sure if we were going to use it for the entire inspection. We had the Inspire in the back as well, and our jaw dropped when we had it go right through the structure. And this was a pretty cramped area. This was an older arch spandrel concrete bridge, and we just couldn't believe it. And then at that point, we're like, "Okay, we'll leave the Inspire in the trunk. We're not even going to touch it because we can be so much more efficient with this workflow." And the workflow was video at that point, and it still is in a lot of cases. So, right tool for the job, the right hardware for the job, but also the right data for the job. You don't always need photogrammetry, and you really want to be as efficient to scale up as possible. So we were doing these video inspections, and the data quality was amazing because we were able to get so close to the deficiencies. And then if we needed some more context, we could step back, and it didn't really matter what was behind us because you hold the stick back, and it's kind of a suggestion to the Skydio. It's not really a command. It's like, hey, I'd like you to go back, and it'll decide if it's safe to do that. And the inspectors on site loved it. From there, we started doing more and more 3D scans, and the great thing about that is that now we have data that's structured and it's measurable. The spatial context is all there. So we started looking more into that, and these are all value adds at the end of the day. And now with products like Qii, the AI that's applied to that in the post processing steps is just creating more and more value. So it's a gradual build up, but compared to what the status quo is, it's unmatched, and it really just doesn't can't even compare. Most of the bridge inspections are actually just done from the ground, what you can see, and then take that and assume the other elements that you can't see are in that same condition state. So being able to see absolutely everything is incredible, especially for our safety.
Right. So nice segue for Michael. So Michael, now we've got tools for collecting the data more efficiently. We've got better data. So you have two parts of the key solution. You've got kind of that asset, that drone data, dealing with that and storing the digital twins, and then the AI part of it, where you're actually starting to do some analysis. So talk about how getting better data and talk about what you do with the data to get it that's going to be so valuable to customers that are deploying.
Well, I think we're in the opportunity space. And Kevin, by the way, I have no idea what soup to nuts means. I think we're all a little nuts to do this work. I think we're all a little nuts. I mean, just don't say I'm not nuts. We're nuts, all of us. I'll start where with Angad. He said you now have an autonomous AI-driven drone that's taking pictures of the top of the bridge, the side of the bridge, and now what Skydio brings to the market is below the bridge. So you start with a photo problem, right? I know we talk about data a lot, but we really talk about a photo problem. And if you take a standard inspection on the low end, you've got 1,000 photographs. So at what point do people end up with a large amount of photo or data problem? Well, if you're an organization doing inspections with drones and you hit 100 inspections of 1,000 photographs, you now manage 100,000 photographs, right? And that's actually a really small number. Inspections could be 3,000 or 5,000 photographs, and and organizations are doing hundreds of inspections. So you have a data problem. One, how do you manage these today? I think the future is to not take 1,000 photographs, to only take selected photographs. But today we're taking photographs of absolutely everything that we see. So we've got to be able to manage that at some point. And I think Ted's right. About 2 years ago, people were hitting this tipping point where they just couldn't use standard tools. They needed a tool specifically designed to be able to manage this type of data. And Qii sits in that kind of space. And the reason why I say I think we're in the opportunity space is a philosophy that our shop uses a lot, which is a saying that AI will not replace you, but someone using AI will replace you. And so you've got traditional methods that are deployed all the time. You've got these really inert industries doing bridge inspections and other infrastructure inspections. And now you've got an AI driven drone that comes on the market. And then you've got AI driven products like Qii that can identify and quantify problems, generate digital reports, create digital environments for collaboration. And so for me, the question is, you've got two bridge inspection companies, one using traditional methods and one innovating on robotics and digital platforms. Does the second, the latter, be able to create efficiencies that can transfer into cost savings and increase margins, faster time of service, better deliverables, and client satisfaction? And that's what I think the opportunity that we're discussing about. For me, the latter bridge inspection company using innovation beats the standard quo.
Makes sense. Okay, so Angad, I want to follow up with you on that. Something both Michael and Ted mentioned there. So I think you have a unique perspective on it, coming from Pix4D, which was all about taking that data and making maps and outcomes. So how do you see Skydio then enabling a little bit more of what Michael and Ted talked about with the efficiency of the data collection and potentially reducing the sheer number and just improving that part of the workflow efficiency?
Yeah, absolutely, Kevin. I think actually what Michael said really resonated with me there. That AI isn't taking your job, but somebody that's using AI is. I I think it's almost that mindset that got me to Skydio. And one of the reasons that I wanted to join this organization and have a job here is that drone companies are changing. Our industry is growing and it's expanding. And the key word here is scaling. That's what AI within Skydio is enabling folks to do. It's enabling to do what all of us want, which is more application, right? The more application, the more jobs that Ted's able to get. The more jobs Ted's able to get, the more efficient that the bridges and the infrastructure that power our society and allow us to do our daily chores and tasks becomes safer and becomes, more understood. It's the same thing where if we get more scale, more folks are using platforms like Qii.AI, right? And businesses are growing and we're changing the narrative of how we do our work. We live in one of the most advanced societies in parts of the world. So obviously we're at the forefront of changing those workflows as change is the only thing that's constant in life. With Skydio based AI, you're giving a skill set to a group of people that before it would take them a lot longer to be able to achieve that skill. If we look at image collection for inspection, traditionally collecting images for photogrammetry was done by pilots in airplanes or big satellites way up there, right? And even inherent drones and quadcopters have democratized it, meaning increased the scale of the number of people using it by making that technology cheaper, easier to use. With Skydio, you're taking now this amazing technology that's small quadcopters and small aircraft with a camera, right? These small flying cameras that allow folks to collect photos of things they previously were not able to. And now AI is making that even easier. So instead of someone that has to be taught in a multi day class how to collect photos effectively of a large asset and then has to go practice that, now you have a drone that's making those decisions on board, on the edge, and allowing that individual to do that task. For example, I was doing a webinar 2 weeks ago with the electric utility company, and one of the comments on board was that 5 years ago in their drone program, this major electric utility company in the United States, this energy company, had drone pilots that went out with inspectors or went out with the bridges, the engineers. Today, they give them a Skydio drone because the drone's so much easier to use because the AI is making it the easiest drone in the world to fly. And the AI is making it so that the pilot doesn't have to be as well trained or as well practiced. And so now you're scaling that skill set out, which means that if you're scaling out for a utility company, you're making that utility company more effective at finding faults, at fixing those faults, and essentially making their grid safer for the communities that need that energy. Same thing with the bridges, right? I think that the more inspections, the more preventative maintenance that we can do by having more intelligence overall more efficient our systems become. So what's AI doing with drones and analysis tools like Qii.AI? It's scaling it out, and we can see that.
Perfect. Yeah, no, I think it's a great point. And one of the things we talked about yesterday was this trend of skilled labor shortages, particularly in inspectors. There's a lot of gray hair and not a lot of young fluffy hair coming into the business. So it's going to be a challenge. So anything that can improve efficiency is good. So I'm going to swing back to you, Ted. So on the collection side, now you're getting this. It wasn't that long ago that like a digital twin was like a head scratcher. So where are you in terms of the asks from your customers and the demand for I need all this stuff so I can have these digital twins, and then what does that look like, and then what do they tend to be? Give me some examples of what they're actually using the data for.
Yeah. Well, it all depends on the asset, and there's a small bridge, there's a big bridge. It doesn't always make sense to produce a complete digital twin of every structure because there is cost involved with that. There's more time in the field. There's more post processing costs. There's also just more data to store somewhere, right? So, what we're seeing is it being applied to specific scenarios or specific elements of the bridge. Ideally, as we move through this process and we get more and more data and we build up more and more intelligence about the entire portfolio of assets, then we can safely start to switch from an inspection frequency that's just arbitrary, like a 2 year, every 2 year a bridge inspection it has to be done, to a risk-based model where we're inspecting the bridges that need to be inspected more often, and we have the data to back that up. And the bridges that have a BCI of 95, for example, a bridge condition index, then maybe we can make those once every 3 years or once every 4 years. And ultimately, this will lead into major cost savings, and we'll keep our infrastructure just as safe. But we need to get there. We need to develop this database. We need to develop this intelligence of the current condition of these assets. And digital twins are the best way to do that because everything is measurable. Everything is comparable year to year. And as we do this more and more, the owners start to see this value, and they start to see that it really starts to shine the second time you're there because now you're doing comparative analysis between those two surfaces, and those preventative maintenance triggers can be hit when they need to be hit, and there's your ROI right there. If you do some preventative maintenance that is significantly less costly than something that has to be done due to a safety issue, then you're preventing that safety issue and you're saving yourself a lot of money in the long run. And these are all taxpayer dollars at the end of the day, right? So there should be a big push from everybody to move in this direction because there's just a lot of efficiencies created when we have this intelligence and we've built it up over time, and we actually put it to use in a smart way.
So when you're doing bridges specifically now, what kinds of analysis and what kinds of data are the engineers looking at it? What are they actually using and what decisions are they making based on it?
Well, you have to understand that ultimately the report of an inspection is going to end up on a PDF somewhere, right? So
Mhm.
it's going back to 2D every time. What we're trying to solve, and what Key, for example, does really well, is it boils down all of those thousands of images that would take hours and maybe weeks for an engineer to go through and inspect visually, to just the few key points that they need to look at, the key elements, and then they can make their assumption based on that. So it varies by structure. Again, it's a very fluid environment that you have to deal with. But ultimately, we still need an engineer looking at it at some point. If we can make that part more efficient for them as well, that's a big win. And digital twins do that really well because they give us spatial context, right? You open up a digital twin, you open up a model, you see a damage, and you can very right away understand where on that structure that damage is located. And ultimately, you go through that, you pick the ones that are really interesting. You use AI to boil that down and make that process much more efficient, and then you bring it back into that PDF that we all love. And that's not going to really change. Like, I think it's going to be a long time before PDFs are completely replaced by 3D models. But the 3D model is a very valuable intermediary step, that creates a lot of value and allows us to then compare that year over year.
Perfect. So Michael, now let's talk about that whole workflow. So you're kind of from the model to the PDF and enabling people to look at that model. So for you, what's like the optimal use of Qi.AI by those engineers internally? Like when they're using it as it should and it's optimal, what is it doing and what does it do for them?
Well, I'll go backwards through it. I think the optimum is you've created a model, you've been able to identify the condition of the model, and you're able to then go email that to your client, open up a browser and get into the environment. I think that's absolutely the optimum. Ted's absolutely right. PDF reports are rule. I don't see them going away anytime soon whatsoever. But we would be prior to the model, in fact, Kevin. So you've flown the flight, you've collected all this data. Now you need to structure the data. You've chosen to do that in a digital twin, so you need something to process that. Then you need something to be able to review it. And I'll break there to say uh, it's my belief that you need to be able to access a 2D photos in some sort of synchronization with a 3D environment. So there's a photorealism in the 2D that needs to accompany today's versions of a digital twin. And then, okay, great, you're looking at something. What's interesting is you're now in a remote work world or mode and working digitally. But then you need to be able to have some sort of interaction, user interface to mark that up and create a report, right? So that really is sort of the end results of that. And then the tack on is, well, okay, you made these decisions about the condition of the report. Can you actually pull those down into some sort of training environment and create predictions on your next models after that? And I think that's again where the opportunity space is to build efficiencies of something that knows what I'm looking for and can start feeding me that information very efficiently digitally. And that's really what we're talking about with AI is I just want to start looking at the bridge and I want the platform to start feeding me in information so I can go, yep, that's my biggest problem. Let's record that and move on. And that's what our mission is here today at Key.
Mhm.
Excellent. So how do you envision the AI piece of this? So where is it now? So what can you do now, and what do you think you're going to be able to do 2 years from now?
Well, I think that it's out of first and second gear for sure, and starting to create really good results in a 80 to 90% confidence, meaning that it's picking up problems at a significant rate. Big problems, so if we're talking about bridges, big cracks would be at a high degree. Those are fairly easy to see. You can think about AI performance as mimicking human performance. So we see big cracks fairly well. Computer vision can see big cracks fairly well. Small cracks are challenging. And then what is before us, then the nature of those cracks, whether or not they've had a previous restoration, so you have some filler, those sorts of things, would be the sort of next stage to get even smarter at that. But what I would say, Kevin, is if you manually needed to leaf through 1,000 photographs, you can now use a platform to look holistically at the 3D model, maybe access a dozen photographs, and within those photographs, in a second or two, have deficiencies represented at a greater than 80% confidence that they are deficiencies. So, great place to be, even better future.
Fantastic. Okay, so just staying on the AI theme for a second. So Angad, we talked about AI in terms of the autonomy and the navigation. So what do you think the next level for AI with Skydio in those areas is?
Sure. I am speaking a bit to my personal opinions on this question,
Perfect.
just to be transparent. But I think it moves towards what is the whole point, right? What is AI doing for the end user? That's where I think we're going. Is when you're an end user and you're out there and you're flying a drone around the bridge, you're not necessarily truly caring about flying a drone around that bridge in that moment. You're doing it because someone paid you to be out there to figure out how big that crack is, and that's what Michael's platform with Qi.AI is doing, right? So that's a semantic question. That's a question with meaning that means something to an engineer that allows them to fix that crack or do preventative maintenance or fix a fault that means that the bridge is safe and people can pass over it, right? So I think that AI continues to move forward, providing more semantic understanding and semantic and that meaning of solving a specific problem to people. It's like when you're flying a drone to do something. So the AI on board on Skydio will then get better at doing that something, whether that be, hey, going and looking at a particular gauge and getting a reading of what that gauge is because there's no other way to reach it or access it without a drone going out and doing it. Or when you're looking underneath a bridge, looking at a particular beam and seeing its structural integrity and seeing how much rust is on top of it, and maybe even live telling you what the surface area of the amount of rust is on the beam that you're looking at, on the photo that you're looking at through the drone, right? This is in the future, but this is where we're going. I think that with every year, with more development and usage, AI is providing simpler answers for the people that are using those tools to get those answers. And so I would say that that comprehension of the technology, so that the end user is getting more value and being more efficient, getting the answer that they really need. That's important, right? And how do we do this as humans? Like everyone has that annoying cousin that asks them why like 4 times, right? Or you got a 5-year-old you're sitting down next to. Like my partner is a second grade teacher, and she comes home, going, "Oh, this kid asked me why 8 times." But that kid's actually very smart, because when we ask someone something, we're never really getting the answer we want on the first why.
Right.
It always takes 3 or 4, right? I mean, this is, okay, well, why do you want to eat that? Well, and then what does that mean to your body if it's healthy to eat that? And then why do you want to eat it now? Are you hungry now or not now, right? Everything we do in life basically takes a couple whys to get there. Well, with the drone, why are you flying the drone? To fly this bridge. Why are you flying the bridge? Because my boss asked me. Why did your boss ask you? To find the crack that's there. Why did they do that? So that they can fix the bridge later or do preventive maintenance, right? So I think that AI and semantic understanding gets us to answering that why. That's a couple whys down the line.
Right. Makes sense. So Ted, from your perspective, again, as a service provider part of this, like what do you want to see? Like what would you like to be able to do with the equipment, first of all, and then secondly, actually in terms of some augmented analysis right there in the field before you get to the PDF.
Yeah, well, great question. Before I answer that, I just want to add on to what Michael and Angad said. One of the things that we experience in this field and in the inspection of heavy civil infrastructure is the wide variety of images and scenes and angles and lighting. And AI is still in its infancy. We still have a lot of way to go to really get the most out of it. What Qii.AI does really well that people really need to understand is that it allows you to build basically your own classifiers and really customize the type of damages that you're looking for, and that's a human supervised step. And ultimately, what I'm looking for in the future, like the holy grail of this, is that we have one thing that just works in every scenario, right? Regardless if it's metal, concrete, asphalt, it just picks up all the damages that we as humans would be able to identify. We're getting there. It's going to take some time. So it's important that we're realistic with the current capabilities, and we're not sort of saying this is the end all be all of AI, but the future is really really bright. I've seen a few, I've talked to a few people working on some really interesting research, and ultimately, imagine we had an iPhone app or something on your phone where an inspector, after a severe weather event or some sort of emergency situation, is able to go up to the bridge bridge, take a picture of an element, of a pier, of part of that structure, and in near real time calculate the structural rigidity of that asset, of that element specifically, right? And then from that extrapolate if there needs to be more investigation. So I think that's sort of the idea we're all going towards here, but it takes a lot of data to get there. We're in its infancy, but the future is really really bright, and it more and more that we can do in real time, and less having to take this file and upload it to somewhere else, and the more that we streamline that, the better. But we still need to do that today, and that's completely fine because we build a very good library of data as well. And as it's if it's in one place, if it's in one platform, then you have a really strong data set to start building those classifiers for and build some really unique and custom tuned models that work really well for your use cases. But we're in a very unique situation. We don't have these amazing data sets and models that are pre-trained and ready to go for us. So there's a little bit of work to do.
It's funny. So as we were doing some planning for some of these sessions, and Fraser and I were just talking and throwing ideas around, and the first thing we thought of is, hey, if I was a service provider, there's probably going to be a very good business very soon about just collecting data for training AI models. And that's kind of all you do, and you maybe have a couple of people tagging it internally, or you find somebody overseas to do it, and that's your business, just giving giving these partially or fully trained models. So
Yeah.
something to think about.
Well, 95% of AI models never make it into production, right? They're started as research or they're started as sort of a project, but very quickly you understand that there's a lot that goes into it, especially when we're talking about the semantics of a scene.
Yeah.
And there's just a lot of things we're looking for, and as humans it seems easy, but for computer vision it's very challenging. I definitely agree though that those white truffle data sets are going to have incredible value in the future.
Perfect. Yeah. So for those of you watching, they'll be that are more interested in some of the geeking out on the AI stuff and some of the autonomy. I suggest tomorrow at 11 you'll see the advanced autonomy discussion. So we'll have Levitas in there, and then Thursday at 3 o'clock we'll actually have a case study from Ontario Power Generation with an autonomous spot with some AI for gauge reading on site. So you get to hear all about that. So if that's your thing, make sure you tune in for that. So just going back to the data collection. So we've primarily talked about photogrammetric data, but Michael, I know you are asked now and are getting asked more and more to integrate a lot of different other types of data. Can you maybe talk about some of the additional kinds of inspection data you're being asked to integrate?
Of course, I'd love to. Well, we focus on infrastructure. So, of course, visual inspections, level one inspections, we're trying to digitize and automate through AI. Thermal sensors can play a lot of value to those type of inspections. Just happens to be one of the earliest sensors that drones started flying. And then we discovered a really interesting thing. We started to really focus down on infrastructure's biggest problems, which, by the way, comes from age. We're really talking about an age problem with infrastructure as much as it's a safety issue. Uh, Virtually everything's between 60 and 100 years old. And if you've made it out of concrete, it probably has problems. In fact, we know for sure it has several problems like cracking and spalling. And if you've made it out of steel, it likely is corroding. And so we decided from an AI perspective to focus on those neural networks. And then we discovered that if you put this by the sea, you've actually increased the problem, and the infrastructure generally goes below the water line. And there was this gap with sonar that I think that the drone industry filled with photogrammetry a long time ago, which is they were taking what they call records, which are photos, acoustically, and using products like Photoshop to be able to manually stitch these together. So we decided to solve that problem and include sonar. So now in Qi, you can stitch sonar records and then fuse them to above the waterline with drone photographs. So imagine a bridge that goes over, spans a river that's got bridge abutments below the waterline. And these, Kevin, have traditionally been two completely different disciplines and divisions within organizations. And we see a huge opportunity to combine them. And we wouldn't mind if the drone world owned that.
Mhm. Excellent. So Ted, what about you from a collection perspective? What additional things are you being asked to potentially bring to the table in these kinds of inspections?
Yeah, Michael mentioned thermal data, and you know this very well, Kevin. Thermal was like the first killer app for drones, right? So there's a lot of merit in that with infrastructure inspection as well. It also depends on the structure itself. For bridges, I don't see too many use cases for thermal, but for other types of heavy infrastructure buildings, especially commercial buildings, it's amazing what it can drive, especially agricultural buildings as well, where there's organic matter inside. Um, you do need to eventually be able to integrate all of this. There's insights that you can draw from the visual information from photos. There's additional insights that can be drawn from the thermal infrared data, and you do need a platform that accommodates all of them, or has the ability to do that. Because if you generally stick to one platform and you have a project that comes up that requires something unique, that can put you in a bit of a situation. So I always look for that, you know, data agnostic platform when I'm picking something. And for that reason, honestly, I've kind of stayed away from the cloud based stuff just because we're still getting there. Again, I thought I was late to the drone game in 2017. It's still early now, so we have a lot of work to do. But ultimately, there's very few projects where we're dealing with just one type of data, such as just images. And 3D is definitely the biggest other data type, but thermal is definitely there, as well as LiDAR point clouds, and the list just goes on. GPR, I think, is also making a huge impact on some of these inspections, especially for the deck, for example, of a bridge. So being as scalable and flexible in that regard is top of mind. It's just a matter of really understanding your customers first and what they're going to need.
Hmm. And I think it's a perfect example when you talk about some of those sensors. So obviously with GPR, at least yet, you're not going to get that on a Skydio sized drone, and if not even a big one. So that goes back to another one of the themes we have from yesterday, which is this multimodal inspection types where you're going to have multiple types of vehicles, and it places a premium on being able to control those with the same and minimize the training. And so there's some really interesting products like the Hasbot, which is a vertical concrete structure robot. I don't know if you've seen it. It's pretty wild. Jack's going to join us at one of the upcoming ones, but that has a GPR. And so there's certain areas where you're going to need different data than you can get with the Skydio. Pilings, things like that, as Michael said, you're going to have like a deep trek or some kind of ROV. And they're doing some amazing stuff with underwater autonomy, if you can believe that. It's mind blowing. It just makes me excited every day. So Angad, sort of last question for you. One of the things that I've noticed about Skydio is, as being a follower of Skydio and watching you evolve, and the first thing was kind of that DIU, very public safety oriented, and now you've really made a big, aggressive, and I think so far successful move into infrastructure and asset management. Exactly what we're talking about now. So can you maybe share with us one or two success stories that you've had with the product stateside or globally that would be good for the viewers to hear about today?
Sure, absolutely. I'm been at Skydio less than a year. I think the vast majority of the go-to-market team at Skydio on the enterprise sales side and the solutions engineering side is within the last 2 to 3 years, and the reason for that is, as a manufacturer, right? Adam Bree, he's our CEO and founder, and he came with there were three buddies from MIT that moved to Silicon Valley, and they started working on AI for pilot assistance and obstacle avoidance. So you can think about that. That's a very challenging problem to take cameras and allow AI algorithms on board to make decisions to make the drone easier to fly. And they started with that, and they really became popular as the follow me drone, right? And a lot of the marketing was geared towards action sports. That transition has definitely happened from applying for DIU, Defense Innovation Unit, for the SRR program, which is short range reconnaissance. It's the American DoD's, the Army's program for essentially finding a small quadcopter for the platoon size deployment, and Skydio has won that after many years and a lot of effort building that type of technology, and now is becoming a drone that is, when we in federal procurement we call it a program of record, essentially with the Army and its sister organization in the Marines, or the sister program to that, where Skydio has become that drone of choice for that particular use case. Now, Skydio is built on that, and why has it been able to? Because it's software driven hardware, where the software designates the true capabilities of the equipment. And by changing software and making it more fine tuned for uses in the enterprise space, in the utility space, bridge inspection, and even public safety with Overwatch and crime scene, what we've done is we've taken a piece of equipment that was initially meant for consumer, changed it, and now has been able to enter that market. And as the company has changed, we've seen adoption rate. So the successes in the federal side are very clear. But on the enterprise side, we can see it where now over 50% of the DOTs in the United States are using Skydio technology for bridge inspection. And you can see it because we're on panels like this today, where folks are looking for that technology because it's making their life easier in the field to have an image collection tool that's AI powered and avoids the object that they're scanning while simultaneously looking at it and getting very close. And I hope that's a sustainable answer.
Perfect. Excellent. So I'll just do a little spiel. So any questions that we have from there, you can text me directly. I know some of you have, and if you also want to put them in the chat box, please go ahead and do your questions, and then we'll just sort of wrap things up. So I got a text. I'm not going to mention their name because they asked me this for every manufacturer, and I have to complain I don't know. But Angad, this is for you. The question is Skydio going to come up with a larger platform with some kind of interchangeable sensors?
Can This is a fantastic question, right? And definitely the question that everyone wants to know the answer to. And I can tell you that only time will tell.
Very good. That was good. You're learning. I'm not going to say who the master of that is, but you guys are learning. That was quite impressive. Excellent.
Kevin, I've known you for years, right? I'm not sitting at a brand working for Skydio, and fully investing all my time and my effort into a company that's growing at a very fast rate for them not to be continuing down this pathway of producing industry leading solutions.
Perfect.
It's this is a partnership, right? Industry today, it has to continue to grow. Technologists, they want to continue to build technology. So only time will tell, and I can tell you I'm excited. So I hope you're excited too.
I am. I am. So thank you. So we have a question, and the question is use the word ephemeral. And so this I will read this with the seriousness that it is due. Do you see drone pilots, aka lowly inspection grunts, as an ephemeral profession, or is there a real place for it in the future? You talk about evolving industry. How are the pilot roles evolving, or are they only devolving? What an awesome question. Alex, great question. And I saw you were the first one there. Congratulations again, and God bless. So, who wants to take that? Pilots, are we just grunts? Are we going to be gone, or are we devolving? Ted, I think that's a Ted one right there.
Yeah. I'll jump in on this right away. It's not going away. You're always going to need subject matter experts that understand the field work very specifically and really tied to what they're doing. Of course, for some areas it will, and I think it should because we need it to be more democratized. But there's so many applications, and we run into new applications every single day, that you can't expect a company to have an internal team that can tackle it. Sometimes it's a one-off, sometimes it's just too complex. So don't worry about that. The technology is going to get better. On God kind of hinted to that. Everything is going to get better. You're always going to need to have someone, in some case, piloting a drone. The piloting is what may actually go away, though. It's not really you on the sticks. It's you making sure that the area is clear, you making sure that the parameters and the software are correct. So the old school fashion piloting may be going away, but there's still going to be a human in the loop for the field work, and the use cases are just going to continue to grow. So I'm very bullish on that.
Good. Michael, I
Kevin?
saw you waving your arms there.
Yeah, well, as a former pilot, I'm not a drone pilot, but I did 20 years in manned aviation. And I see a lot of crossover, but of course, time is very accelerated in 2023 and in the drone market. When I started flying, it was dials and a lot of hands and feet. When I finished on a large airliner, I barely knew how to fly with my hands and feet, and I knew how to systems operate. I can imagine that even as autonomy crosses over, the skill set for a successful pilot to one day go to operating a Skydio, to then an interior drone like the flyability, or then a manual job that requires stick and rudder skills, and to move from a refinery to a bridge to a building to inside of some sort of warehouse. The skill set may not be, as Ted points out, the actual takeoff, hover, and land, but it's going to be there for sure. They're going to be very advanced professionals in my mind.
Okay. All right. And I actually I believe it's ephemeral. Ephemeral is the correct
Ephemeral.
pronunciation. So Alex, there you go. You learned my word of the day. So Angad, there's another question from Rob. How you doing, Rob? Hope you're doing excellent. Thanks for joining. Does the Skydio work in GPS environments with no ambient light?
So yeah, Skydio absolutely works in GPS denied. I think you say in GPS environments, Rob. I wonder if you mean GPS denied environments.
Or he did say denied. Yes,
Yeah.
GPS
Okay.
denied
Okay.
with no ambient light.
So it does work in GPS denied environments, right? I mean, we have, for example, Skydio has a little pedestal. It's a little tripod where the S2 can sit on it and it can do automated inspections in warehouses or through tunnel systems. Those are GPS denied environments inherently, right? Skydio has the capability to fly from outdoors to indoors, and we do a lot of flights indoors. So absolutely, with the navigation based system, you can do GPS denied environments. Now, the question of no ambient light is an interesting one because if there's no ambient light, you're not going to see anything through the camera. So why are you flying to begin with? Skydio's navigation-based system requires light for the obstacle avoidance. So you need about okay. So the standard is about 75 ish, basically somewhere within 50 to 75 lumens of light. So you can think about the amount of light in an emergency stairwell in a commercial building. That's the basically the amount of light that is required for the Skydio obstacle avoidance to operate. The X now Skydio's X2 line of drones, you can fly it in GPS night flight, which means that if you're in a GPS based area, you can fly it there at night and the obstacle avoidance will turn off completely. But the reality with this question is if you don't have enough light to look at for the camera to take pictures of what you want to take pictures of, it doesn't matter if you're flying to begin with or not.
There you go. Great. And I'll add a couple of things because we actually tested this with I think it was an S1, maybe even it might have been an S2. But if you remember, if you go back on it was probably 2-3 years ago where we did the small SUAS throwdown, and we did all Skydio, Autel, DJI, everything. And we found they all, as it got darker, they all moved way slower, which makes sense. And the Skydio did perform as Angad said about much better as it was lighter and better down to that sort of pitch dark, and then none of them liked it in pitch dark. I will also say we have the same thing with the Boston Dynamics, which uses a similar visual system with the Spot Dog. And what we've done is we've had a lot of success with putting LED lighting on there, and that does allow for much better navigation. So so Rob, you and I were talking about this yesterday as an indoor alternative underground for the Helios 2. That would be a great question if you're on this afternoon on the digitizing the mine. I know Matt McKinnon talked to Sloan over at Skydio about getting something to test that. So yeah, I think that there's good potential in that. So we're going to try and find some small lights. I don't know, Angad, have you found anybody that has like an external light, like a Fox Fury or something that they've tried to do that with?
With the Skydio X2, there's actually a mount exactly for the Fox Fury light.
There you
I
go.
I have it over here somewhere in my pile of drone things.
Yep.
One of the Pelican cases hidden. Um, the Ilios 2 is an amazing piece of equipment, right? I think overarchingly here we've talked a lot about AI. We've also started to talk about how we're differentiating and taking technology that, for example, with Skydio was originally consumer meant, that is now focused and being built for the enterprise space and being focused and being built for specific verticals where it's the best piece of technology for what it does. And I think that's an amazing scale of the industry is solutions for specific solutions, right? We're not going to do what an Ilios is doing. Skydio just won't. What the Ilios does is an amazing thing. Same thing with a Wingtra, right? Wingtra is an
Yep.
amazing piece of equipment. Same with the other large camera holding like very, sensors that fly high in the sky. We're not going to do that. But if you look at what Skydio can do, nobody can do what Skydio can do. And I think that's amazing is that we're starting to have application based technology. And that shows that the industry's changing.
Right. And I think Rob, the important takeaway there is this is where the experimentation comes in, and we hope that's kind of our raison d'etre, reason to be, is really to say, look, is there a way that we can, instead of using whether it's $120,000 or $80,000 Helios 3 versus or $150,000 hover map, or an accent system, can we use a $20,000 drone to get almost the same data, right? And so that's what we're here for. Michael, question for you: Would Qii.AI work for processing thermal road data to detect water main leaks?
Yes. In fact, I think we might be one of the only platforms, if not the only platform, that aligns visual and thermal data. We process it for sure. And we haven't, and then depending on the nature of the leak, that could happen today on the platform, or if it's a little more complicated, something that we'd have to train to, but entirely possible. You bet, Kevin.
Fantastic. Okay. So let's wrap it up. So I want to say thank you to our fantastic panelists. You guys, I want to say, Michael, you've been a huge supporter and coming whenever I call, and I appreciate you and all the work you've done for RMUS and the industry. Thanks,
Thank
Ted.
you.
It's been great working with you and everything. And Angad, you and Joanne and the Skydio team, I appreciate you guys putting up with me. So you'll get a chance to see a lot of this live. We'll be sending out the invites next week for the road shows. So hopefully two, if not all three of these gentlemen will be joining us Thursday, June 14th at our RMUS trade show here in Mississauga. So like I say, invites will be going out there. So Ted, I hope you bring the whole gang there. And give a shout out to the UAV program as Fanshawe College, which is fantastic and is getting ready for another successful. So we're looking at hiring graduates of that program. So if you want to get into this crazy business, let's go. And so Jonathan will put up a quick slide there. This is the remainder of the sessions. You can go to the sign up page and sign up for any of these. Even if you can't attend the session, give it a sign up because that will automate you to get the link, the recorded link. And so that just makes it a little easier, even if you can't attend it live. So thank you everybody, and hopefully we'll see you this afternoon or the balance of the week. Take care.
Thanks,
Thank
Kevin.
you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye bye.